Joining us now are Republican strategist and radio host Malik Abdul and Kurt Bardella, Democratic strategist and former House GOP Oversight Committee advisor. Thanks so much for both being here, guys.
Thanks for having us. Happy Thanksgiving, by the way.
Hey, happy Thanksgiving to you, too. Kurt, I want to begin with you. We're looking at this ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, which is now set to begin tomorrow. I just hinted at the political implications that this could have. So let's talk about this agreement to release those 50 hostages and what that means for President Biden.
Well, I mean, I think it's a good thing. I think anytime that you can have progress, that you can put a pause on violence, that you can actually get these two parties that are so far apart in so many ways to agree on anything, that's a step in the right direction, no matter how small, incremental, no matter how temporary this ceasefire may be. It at least gives everybody a chance to kind of take a breath, go to their collective corners, and then try to see if this is a building block towards a more permanent, peaceful solution.
Malik, do you agree there with this being considered just sort of a temporary solution? And tell me your thoughts on what it could mean for the president.
Yeah, and of course, they're considering this a pause. So this is very good news for the hostages, for those families. Whether or not this means anything for Joe Biden on the political sense really remains to be seen, because he really is being criticized from the left on his position. And even though I'm a Republican, I could say that some of that criticism of Biden is unfair, but Biden has to do much more than what he's been doing thus far. And because we've been entangled with what's happening between Russia and Ukraine, it's very difficult for Joe Biden to really make anything progressive on the foreign policy front. But I think there are some opportunities here for him. I just don't think that it will factor into the 2024 midterm election.
Yeah, and obviously
in the presidential election.
Yeah, this topic's so polarizing, so controversial. Everyone, of course, is keeping their eyes on it and has an opinion about it. I want to look at this most recent poll from Emerson, which shows the president's handling, or sort of the Americans' opinion on the president's handling. Only 37% coming in, showing that they believe President Biden's handling of the Israel-Hamas war as poor. So does this hostage deal help President Biden sort of improve those polling numbers?
Well, I don't think that it hurts. I think that there is going to be just a ceiling in general of how many people in America are going to really give him credit until there's an actual resolution here. As long as this conflict is ongoing, I think there's going to be a lot of fluctuation politically. I think also one of the key things that's going to really matter is what happens in January, when Congress has not one, but two deadlines in terms of how they're going to fund things going forward, including how they're going to fund the conflict in the Middle East, including how they're going to fund Ukraine. How those things go will ultimately affect the politics of this broader.
Kurt, let's keep it with you. I want to talk about President Biden's unwavering support. In your opinion, does it seem as if that could cost him in the end with Democrats, them seeing his position and his unstaunched stance on it?
I think that Democrats will continue to express how they feel that the president generationally might be out of step with them. I don't think at the end of the day that this is the reason why any of those Democrats don't show up in November of 2024 when the alternative is Donald Trump. There's been one thing that we've seen consistently over the last couple of years. Nobody has a more unifying impact on the Democratic Party than Donald Trump.
Yeah, we're also looking at a different poll from Emerson showing support Biden versus Trump. It shows 47% in favor of former President Donald Trump, 43% in favor of President Joe Biden. Malik, let's talk about these two potential candidates as well. Obviously, age, a big factor that many people consider. President Biden turning 81 years old on Monday. Former President Donald Trump not far behind, 78 in June. Malik, how big of a concern is age as we consider this upcoming election?
Typically, age isn't as big as an issue as it is now, because what we're seeing is a diminished Joe Biden. That is the best way to really describe what we've seen over these past couple of years. Not so much from Donald Trump. It doesn't matter. You know, Nancy Pelosi is older than, I believe, Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And no one could argue that she's as sharp as she was probably 30, 40 years ago. But it does seem to be an issue for Joe Biden. And it is being reflected not just in the polls among Republicans, obviously, but Democrats and independents as well. So Biden's diminished capacity in office will definitely be an issue in the 2024 election cycle.
Kurt, your thoughts on the age?
You know, at the end of the day, I think that the choice is between a, quote, diminished Joe Biden and Donald Trump. I think that's an easy choice for voters to make. We've seen the chaos grenade that Donald Trump is. We've seen what type of violence, mayhem, can come from Donald Trump and his supporters. I think the key question is going to be, do you want competency or do you want to return to chaos? And I think ultimately when voters are faced with that decision a year from now, I don't care what any poll says right now, by the way, but a year from now, when people are actually paying attention and they are reminded of the type of chaos that Donald Trump puts forward on this country, I don't think they're going to want to go back to that again, no matter how old Joe Biden is.
Yeah, big focus on potential rematch between President Donald Trump and President Joe Biden. But obviously, other third-party candidates are trying to get their foot in the door. The final Emerson poll showing RFK Jr. polling at 7%, Cornel West 1%, Jill Stein at 1%. Hey, do we have any insight whether or not these long shots can actually make a difference here, or what effect their candidacy could have on this election?
I think it really depends. It could be actually around the margins. Remember, the last election in 2020 was lost. Donald Trump lost by maybe, 40, 50,000 votes. So it really could matter around the margins, whether or not these third party candidates like an RFK, who really seems to be polling well in connection with Donald Trump and Joe Biden. But ultimately, will people at the end of the day support a third party candidate? It remains to be seen. But as you've seen in that poll, and many of the polls that you've covered recently, Donald Trump is leading in all of them. So it's a very difficult thing for Joe Biden to deal with right now. And I know no one likes a poll that doesn't present them in a positive light, but this is a serious issue. And we would be amusing ourselves or actually confusing this whole thing if we actually believe that Joe Biden isn't concerned about these poll numbers.
Well, everyone has their eyes on December 6th. That's when that final Republican GOP primary debate happens. NewsNation is going to be covering that exclusively. On top of that, the schedule for the presidential debates was just announced this week. I want to pose this to both of you now. If former President Trump is the Republican nominee, do you think that he will participate? Or perhaps the better question is, should he participate?
Well,
I'll go for yes.
Donald Trump right now. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, please. Well, I'll say yes.
I think that's a.
Kurt, go ahead.
I think that's a question for both of them. If you're Joe Biden, there's I think a concern that sharing a stage with a known domestic terrorist sympathizer and potential criminal by that point in time only legitimizes him. I'm not sure that that's something that Joe Biden should do. If you're Donald Trump, we have seen that anytime that he gets outside of the bubble of right-wing conservative media, it doesn't really go well for him. So I don't know how on one hand you can go out there and say every media outlet under the sun is biased against me and they're part of the problem, and then sit there and let their network news anchor question you.
Let's take it to the Republican strategist. What do you have to say there, Malik?
No, I think that Donald Trump should definitely participate in the debates with Joe Biden. I think that Republican voters, American voters, absolutely deserve that. I imagine, and much like my colleague here, they're going to focus on the many things that they've used to attack Donald Trump, that he's a domestic terrorist, despite the fact that he hasn't been convicted of such. No one has been convicted of such in connection with January 6th. But I imagine all of those bombs to be thrown out there. But at the end of the day, we're still dealing with polling numbers that suggest at this point, Joe Biden would lose to Donald Trump in many of the battleground states. You can't get away from those numbers.
I'm loving that jersey. That's CD Lamb, if I'm not mistaken, right? So you got some plans to catch a little football later this afternoon? Absolutely. And America's favorite team is getting ready to play in about an hour or so.
Oh, God. They are not America's favorite team. These guys haven't won a championship, even been anywhere near a championship since 1996. The Dallas Cowboys are as much America's team as any other franchise that hasn't won anything. How can you be America's team if you're losing all the time? These guys, my gosh, no way.
Both you guys are speaking to a Green Bay Packers fan, the only publicly owned team. I think that by itself makes it America's team. Can I put a stamp on that?
And they're doing well right now, by the way.
Yes, they're doing very well. Unfortunately, we missed the ending, but that's okay. I'm happy to be here with you two. Thank you so much, Malik Abdul, Kurt Bardella. Appreciate your insight, and happy Thanksgiving, guys.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, same to you.